Welcome to another episode of Will's Personal Development Show podcast. And I'm Will, and we usually talk about topics around self growth, personal development to help you achieve success in happiness, wealth, love, and health. So, this time we're going to be talking about something different, which is the Asian hate movement. So, this is a serious topic, and it's something that I think it's just worthy of my time to put something out there about it, and spread some positivity. And um, it's something that I think a lot of my Asian American readers would like. Now, my brand, in a way, has grown so that, you know, people of all different colors, ethnicities, sexualities, and ages follow my stuff. I've gotten uh, various different people following my stuff, but I would say to carve out my niche for a lot of the earlier years, and still to an extent now, I had a focus and tagline to be the personal development brand for Asian American millennial men. You may still see a lot of that in some of my older content or even recent content. So, of course, naturally, a good portion of my listeners are Asian American, and of course, I think it's my duty to at least speak out and say something about this. Now, I have um, talked about this already and posted on my social media like Instagram, Facebook, and stuff like that. However, I feel like something more substantial could be useful here. Um, Now, anyone who's already informed about this, they probably won't hear anything new from me about this. I have a lot of just similar thoughts on how we should, you know, band together and make sure it doesn't happen again. You might get some level of unique perspective from me because I will share um, maybe a story or two on my own experiences with it, and maybe some opinions that aren't, you know, with the masses. But in general, of course, um, obviously, I really wish people would not commit hate crimes, whether that's mass shootings or just vandalizing or physically assaulting any elderly Asians or Asian people, men or women. But yeah, that's basically what it is. Now, if anyone's not informed or not as informed, I can kind of go into the details. Now, I would say I'm moderately informed, but I'm sure there's a lot of other people who have more info about this, more uh, details about every single hate crime incident. But I'll tell you what I know, at least in a nutshell, and maybe this will kind of inform you a bit about this. So, yeah, I think the initial hate crimes or hate activities probably started up around when COVID-19 started. So almost a year ago, I saw some stories around the globe. We're not just talking in the USA, but just scrolling on social media, you'll bump into these news stories of something that happened. I think the first incident I saw was from a website called Nextshark, which generally isn't too trustworthy. Sometimes they may sensationalize something, or um, even people make up stories online. So I wasn't too sure at that time, but over time there's been more and more documented cases, even in the U.S., that it's become apparent that this is a thing. But basically, people are blaming all the suffering, whether that's the mental health, the isolation, the things that they can't do, from the COVID-19 pandemic on Asian people. And I think the first incident of that was regarding a person who got severely beat up. I can't remember if it was an elderly Asian woman, but it was someone who was uh, couldn't really defend themselves well, given their stage in life or just their physique, and they got beat up pretty bad by, I think, at least one other person who was Caucasian. and this was all the way in like New Zealand or something. But since then, of course, more and more cases have popped up of people of other ethnicities. I think I saw a couple in from African Americans in San Francisco where elderly Asian women were assaulted. Now, I want to say first and foremost that my message is of love and acceptance. I know that's these types of people are in the hateful minority in the sense that I know a lot of people of color who are respectful, warm, friendly to me. So I personally want to acknowledge that and show respect to that and try and lengthen that rather than just focus on the negative people or make the same small-minded mistake of extending uh, the actions of one to an entire race or people who look alike. And so many months ago, I actually wrote a article about this. And since I still have a pretty darn small following, I was not pressured at all to make this podcast or write that article by anyone. And luckily, I don't get really any comments on my blog. I will get more comments on YouTube and sometimes on my blog, and they can be pretty negative. But I was not pressured in any way to write those or and luckily I didn't get any really negative comments on that. But I wrote this blog post that just kind of expressed my thoughts on this and how, of course, this is should not be accepted, how we shouldn't do this, and why it's just irrational. So you can probably still search that up on my site, willyoulaugh.com. But it was a short, succinct blog post that basically summed up my points, which I think are pretty common, legitimate points voiced by many people in the Asian community who has heard about this. First off, you never want to attack someone who's elderly, who's defenseless. But I think the biggest point I made was that, one, it's just irrational. Like, there's, half the country is Asian. Like, half the nation, not nation, half the world is Asian. So you're basically hating half the world, which is just a horrible thing to do. Billions of people are Asian. And just because it came from one province in one area of one Asian country, you're going to lump every other Asian country into this. Vietnam, Thailand, Japan, Singapore, Korea. You're just going to lump all of them into as contributors to this. It's the most kind of small-minded thing. So I think one point I want to bring up is that a lot of it is just small-minded people who really aren't that educated or really critically think this through. And they're quick to blame any type of suffering they have on, some broad thing that they can, rather than really fix the issue. These are the types of people who usually don't have that winner's mindset to really look at reality and work through it. In a similar way, there's been various pandemics throughout the history of humankind, and many have come from various different areas of the world. The Spanish flu, the bubonic plague. One came from Spain, one came from Europe, and so on and so forth. The avian flu, the swine flu. So obviously, they jump from animals to humans from different countries. And of course, I would never be so small-minded as to just lump all this hate into European people if it came from a European country like it has in the past. In one way, it's just ridiculous. And that just kind of sucks. I think another part of that article was just a large focus on the positivity and love. During that time, I thought that a lot of people I saw who were Asian and voicing their opinions, it came from such a negative place, very toxic and focused on the negativity of it. And sure, like I think that's something that's one side of the voice that should be heard. But I figured I wanted to honor a lot of the people that I saw who were friendly, loving, and respectful to Asians. Um, to me in particular, I knew a bunch of people in real life who were of different ethnicities, who were kind, friendly, respectful to me, would never do something and has never done something like that when I would bump into them or or be around them or communicate and talk with them. So, since the quarantine, I've seen plenty of people who have been very respectful to me, and I wanted to honor that silent majority, the people who stand with me. And I felt like um, I I wanted to do more of that to kind of propel that on. Now, since then, of course, it's definitely gotten worse with multiple incidents being reported on a local level, on a nation level. I mean, I thought it was just like okay, a couple cases in the nation, but then I started hearing about all these. I started hearing about local incidents of this, and then I heard, there's it wasn't just you know older women who just got severely beaten up, but also people who uh, were were attacked or even killed. Apparently, there's an Atlanta case. Now, from what I can understand, the jury is still out on whether it's truly a hate crime. A lot of Asians professionals. I mean, it's blown up on LinkedIn, especially, but as well as TikTok. But they've really voiced out and just basically condemned it as a hate crime. Apparently, the shooter sought out Asian-owned spas, and the majority of the people killed were Asian, though some were not. So I don't know if it was truly hate crime, since like some of them were not Asian, and some are saying that it was done more so out of a kind of Asian fetish for women, and so some people are just voicing out that how that's also another horrible thing. This racial profiling of a woman as a certain type, but honestly, from what I can tell, there's been a lot of voices coming out sharing their stories of racism in the past, and it's become really a platform to also discuss history of racism and the struggles that Asians have faced in that time. So it's really not just about those incidents as a whole, but a lot of the other profiling, discrimination that's happened. So the Black Lives Matter movement happened recently before that, and that's still ongoing. And so there's already some heat behind this. Now, obviously, when you put something online, there's always a spectrum of criticism and negativity. No matter what you put online, there's going to be someone who has some perspective that's nasty and criticizes. Man, I hope that it won't happen when I put this out, but obviously, when you put something on the internet with enough people, that always happens. And so when you see the comments, obviously there's a whole spectrum of sometimes really nasty opinions on this. And obviously the anonymity of a lot of these people doesn't help. Some of them, they're only saying the thing because they're anonymous online. But I saw people on TikTok saying, oh, they're just copying BLM. And then others are saying like, they're supporting this movement. And I love that part. A lot of people just supporting their pride. And then there's others, and I saw these on LinkedIn, some people just straight up coming out as clearly more racist, like saying like, I saw this one post of a Asian man who basically shared his story of how he went to UNC, the college, and he got jumped and beat up by a bunch of white people who told him that white people have power and he better not try kung fu on them. And there's some really disappointing comments from these white professionals. Obviously, a lot of good comments too from people who stood with him and said that this wasn't right and we have to eliminate it. But people with varying different perspectives. Some saying stuff like, oh well, you deserved it, you should have trained in martial arts, that's your own fault. um, to others saying stuff that are, you know, I mean, I can be empathetic to a degree and understand, yeah, you got to be careful out there, but still, it's not just about developing self defense, it's about rooting out ignorant thoughts that lead to ignorant behavior. So, a lot of crazy talk over the over the internet, and I don't want to address it all, but I think there's clearly still room for improvement, and you know we need to band together and work on it. I see a lot of people who do acknowledge it and are working together to root this out, and then there's still a minority, but still often a vocal, loud minority who are ignorant or small-minded about this. So obviously we need to stop it from happening. Some people, and then there's controversy on how to do so. Some people are trying to spread the word as much as possible, and of course this Asian hate movement has really taken storm, and they believe awareness is the best way. Others are saying maybe that's not the best way. If you're spreading this up, you're just giving racist people more ideas on what kind of hate crimes and crap that they can do, which is just terrible. Obviously, a lot of Asian professionals, some very high leaders in the U.S., have spoken out on social media, written articles about this, and really spoken up about this. Many have. It's really spurred a whole movement of vocal people to talk about this and share their own stories. And so another thing that I've seen is that we have so many. I mean, the Asian community, even in America, is very strong. We have a lot of people who have achieved a lot of high levels of contribution in corporate America, as well as nonprofit, government, and so forth. And so you're seeing these people come out and speak out on it, and we're a vital part of the U.S. of A. So I think that's something to be acknowledged as well. We're not just a virus, as some people call it, which again I just think is ridiculous. Some people are not even associated with the country or the province that it came from, or have even been to that country in their life. So to call them out is just ridiculous on so many levels. I think it's definitely gotten more complex. The discussions have gone deeper into not just the crimes, but some have really dug into the history of racism and the long history of racism in the U.S. and how it affects dating, how it affects people fantasizing or kind of profiling Asians as more of a kind of like a sexual kind of thing rather than a person or individual. So that's been another topic of the discussion. So there's a lot to it, but I think in total, at the core of it, just like with everything else, like with all humans, everyone wants to be treated equally, with respect, with dignity, with equal rights, without having the color of their skin cause them to be so discriminated against that they suffer to a large extent unfairly, whether that means an assault or shooting or anything else. And that just sucks. I've seen a lot of people speak out on this on Instagram. A lot of these Asian leaders have even posted reward money to find the people who were responsible for the assaults. I know there's a few cases from a young African man who assaulted some elderly Asian women in San Francisco, and there was like a reward posted because they caught some film of him doing it. So they're trying to find the guy down. And of course, there's some very successful Asian men who were willing to contribute some of that money to the campaign, and Asian women. So, it really sucks. And of course, as always, as we've always wanted, no matter the ethnicity, we've always wanted to be treated equally with that respect, with that love, with that kindness, without unnecessary brutality or misguided, small-minded understandings of fighting and assault or violence or even death. So obviously, there's clear parallels to the Black Lives Matter movement and differences as well. But I think at the core, it's the same thing that every human wants, and we are bonded as humans, whether people like it or not. Now, I want to share my own story because not it's not always that other minorities, which I used to assume would band together and help us, and that's what I want. I want that to happen, and to support each other. But that doesn't always happen. I have a story of another minority, another Hispanic individual, who it's the most recent racist story I've had, and it just shows that with the wrong education or without being informed by the right people or mentors, people draw their own conclusions, and maybe that's where the racism comes from. I don't know exactly, but this was a few years ago, many, I would say 6, 7 years ago. But I was working in food and dining, and there was a individual there, Hispanic, and he was definitely young, like probably college age, and he had a wife and kid already. So he basically like was working as a chef there to provide for his family. But despite that life circumstance, he was very kind of like unhinged in a way. Like he would goof off a lot, laugh a lot, and amuse himself, even if it would rub people the wrong way. And so basically, I was treating everyone there with respect. I was a waiter then, and kind of like waited tables, delivered food and stuff. And of course, everyone there I treated with respect, talked to, gave the orders or the customer's orders and instructions, and delivered the food and so forth in a respectful way. And I one day I started talking to him, and he would just keep responding with the phrase, "Do you like rice?" And it went on for a few days. It was very irritating. Obviously, it affected performance because I can't communicate my order and get things done and make adjustments based off the customer's feedback to orders if that's all he responds with. Obviously, it was very amusing to him. At first, it was flabbergasting, but I realized it was a racist thing. Ultimately, I handled it in not the best way. I think I should have told my boss, and that would have definitely helped handling. Instead, I kind of just blew up at him and I yelled at him. And I made some type of kind of vague threat, like, I can screw you up so much if you keep doing that. Maybe he meant that I was going to beat him up, but I was more so thinking like I was going to tell my manager. And that's something that could really destroy his career, get him fired, affect his family life. And there are clear laws, human resource laws, against that type of behavior in in the U.S. legal system for workplaces. So I knew that it had damaging effects because I took a class on it in school. But I blew up at him. I should have just informed my boss. Well, but after that, he just stopped doing it. He was shocked and he stopped. Maybe he was threatened or what else, but it just goes to show you that this man, obviously he had probably lower level education, and he may have just never been informed by his parents. Maybe his parents didn't have an opinion either way, and because of this, he just kind of draws his own opinions from his own very limited world experience, and he just figured it's okay to really disrespect and maybe even didn't think of it as disrespectful. He just conducted a lot of small-minded, racist behavior that ended up being very disrespectful and unproductive, and it was just a bad situation. So I really think it's not just awareness, but it's really about teaching, sharing, modeling, and spreading that in an intentional way to our younger generation. We're talking, our children, young friends and family we know. Because if you don't make that intentional effort, if you just assume, okay, they should, figure it out on their own that this is not okay, well, maybe they won't. Maybe they will, but what if they stumble across just the wrong influences on the internet, or they just don't know any better, so they just assume, oh yeah, this stuff is okay, and they don't realize how misguided or small-minded or inaccurate it can be when you profile a person in a certain way based on their skin color. So very serious discussion, and I mean, obviously we can discuss this for a long time, but I think we've discussed it enough. I think my main message here is obviously one of love, of kindness, um, and you know what we want. We all want to be treated with respect, equality, not excessive violence, um, and for people to be more educated, and for this movement, I don't know if it's good or bad that we're spreading more awareness of it, but we are, and I hope it leads to a better outcome with maybe people who didn't necessarily see uh, that side of things from what it is like to be Asian American, or uh, didn't really consider certain parts of that situation, to maybe start to think differently and change their minds. Maybe even if it helped one person, go from someone who would have committed uh, racist acts, whether violent or not, to not do so and change their thinking. I think that on its own could be worth it. Um, but of course, you would have to account for all the negative it caused and everything in the summation. So it's complicated, but at the same time, it's not. It's simple. We all wanted to be treated with respect. We want our family, our elders, people who can barely walk to be treated with respect rather than beaten to a pulp um, while they're walking down the street. Um, it's fairly simple at its core, and the question is, how can we do that? How can we inform and educate and change the consciousness of people who aren't there yet and don't think like that? And how can we come together and lift each other up and see our similarities rather than turn our differences into these terrible tragedies that continue to happen? Um, Maybe in a way I'm less optimistic than that first article I wrote a few months ago in terms of all that positivity, but part of me is still optimistic. I think things are a lot better now than they were 20 years ago, and much better now than they were 40 or 50 years ago. Obviously, there's still a lot of hurdles, as we can clearly see, for Asians, for other ethnicities, black, white, yellow, orange, red, whatever color, whatever background you have. There's still obstacles, in Hollywood, in dating, in life, in just living and having equal rights. And these are things that are obviously heightened now, and obviously cause us a lot of stress, causes me some stress. Like, who knows what the heck's going to happen to you? Is there going to be a mass shooting when you go outside? Um, but the best we can do is put our best foot forward, try and spread love rather than hate, come together, appreciate life, try and spread awareness and education. Look at the data, the stats. If no other stat calms you down, maybe just think about, okay, yeah, these mass shootings happen, but the chances that they'll happen to you are very low in comparison to getting hit by a car. So that might help you a bit, maybe not. Who knows? And then come together and spread that love and solidarity. I don't really know what else to say. I mean, I think I've covered the big points. I mean, it sucks. I don't think it'll be over anytime soon. Um, I love all the people who are not Asian, who have come out, not just publicly on the internet to support these movements, but also through taking their time and energy to erect signs and stand with these people at protests. I mean, that's something as well. Once again, I want to acknowledge all the people out there who have come together and are positive and walk with us and say this is not right, and we want to make sure that our future generations know this. I think at the end of the day, I am optimistic, and I think these kind of things suck. Like, to be born into a world where a lot of this stuff still happens sucks, but you know, we have to do what's most productive about this. We can't just let the stress and anxiety and the anger of it just lead us to do nothing productive. We can do something positive that's not harmful, um, that can help us all. So there's that's it. Obviously, there's a lot of resources. I'll probably post it in the show notes, but there's a lot of resources that we can all use to educate ourselves more about this. Um, Myself included. There are documentaries about this, about the history of race in the country. There are books about this. There's free stuff. There's paid stuff. There's a PBS 5-part documentary called Asian Americans, which covers the history. And there's all sorts of other stuff that you can do to educate yourself, such as uh, the various collections of essays and articles published about the experience. Um, so, and if you want to go further, obviously there's all sorts of other nuances not related to hate crimes that have affected us in Hollywood, or the perception of how cool or not cool we are as a culture in America. Obviously, it's a very complex place, and the USA is only one element of that. You have all these other countries in the world that are experiencing their own dynamics of it. Some even more racist situations than others, and different cultures where things are going around. So I don't know. I wish for the best, and once again, I want to just end by saying I want to honor and show appreciation and gratitude for those who have respected me, seen me as equal, and not really shown any hatred or anything. Nothing but kindness and respect, given my race in these times. So there you have it. That's my little part in this story. Thanks for listening, and as always, if you can subscribe, leave a rating on my podcast. It's available at Apple Podcast, Apple, Spotify, Pandora, pretty much anywhere where you can play a podcast. It's even on Audible now and iTunes. So check it out. Thanks for listening. Peace.